Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Yet Another Movie Podcast. I'm Shane Wallach.
And Sean Higgins.
And today we are here to talk about Dunkirk and other war movies from World War II. Yeah. So we were thinking a little bit like, what do we want to do for Dunkirk? Because it's like, you could do a Christopher Nolan special. You could do, a historical film, bunch of different types of films. Heck, there are some films that mention Dunkirk in other contexts, so we could have done that.
Sure.
But we like, me and you wanted to talk about some movies that we enjoy, that we really like. And we were like, okay, we can tie it into the World War II aspect, and we can pick one of our favorite World War II movies that we are passionate about. We just wanted to bring it out in the open.
Right.
Essentially.
But since World War II is such a big war, we did have to come up with some ground rules, so we're just going to lay them down here real quick. It had to be about a war, about a battle, or be connected to a battle. It couldn't be something like Schindler's List, even though obviously that is related very heavily to World War II.
Yeah.
We can't pick that. Also, because Dunkirk was on the Atlantic front, it had to be based on something that happened on the Atlantic front. So, sorry, no Bridge on the River Kwai for today. Maybe some other time.
Bridge on the River Kwai, nothing Pacific
No Hacksaw
War.
Ridge.
It had to be the Atlantic front, and we wanted it to be specifically dealing with the European, probably France.
Right.
Or Germany, as in the case of my choice of film. But, they're close enough to each other that in both tone, a lot of them are tonally similar. They are close in terms of the type of film that they are, ensemble pieces,
sure,
as all of these are, in effect, even though a couple have more leading characters than others. And they're all similar in the fact that they are, basically brutal war pieces about actual conflict and battles. This isn't your slow Full Metal Jacket war movie type thing.
Absolutely not,
although, Full Metal Jacket, not giving...
Oh, I love Full Metal Jacket. Yeah.
But, so yeah, these movies are quite different, but we're bringing them together for those reasons. And because we just wanted to talk about it. We wanted to have an avenue for it. And then for Nolan, we'll have plenty of time to talk about Nolan. Me and Sean were just thinking, let's just do a Nolan special sometime, and who cares about tying it into anything? We'll just do it because Nolan's such a notable director.
We'll do it once we've knocked out a few of his other movies, like the Batman trilogy, for instance.
Yeah.
And
so we can start knocking those out. And then, me and you have been talking about a while just doing directors. We could do a whole director's filmography, and Nolan would be one of them. But today, we'll at least knock off Dunkirk. So we'll at least be talking about that today.
Yep.
But starting out, let's just at least get out there what films we chose. So I picked Bridge Too Far, 1977 film directed by Richard Attenborough, concerning the Operation Market Garden invasion, military action, whatever you want to say. That's the film I chose. And Sean?
I chose Saving Private Ryan because I am a Spielberg nut. No, I'm also a huge fan of this movie, and I thought it'd be very fun to talk about. But that's one of my favorite war films. Might be my favorite, actually.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that.
That's a good choice. Yeah. I since I've seen almost like all the war films that Sean has seen, plus plenty more.
You have seen plenty more?
Yeah. I wanted to choose one that you hadn't seen and that maybe doesn't get enough recognition. So for my choice, it's not necessarily my favorite World War II movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's one that doesn't get recognized enough, and I really want to bring attention to it. That's kind of what I was going for with my pick.
Absolutely. I just haven't seen it a lot, so I couldn't really pick an underrated movie anyways.
Well,
so,
hey, you picking a Spielberg film totally makes sense, so absolutely understand that. Okay. So, me and you decided beforehand we're going to go chronological order, which kind of makes sense, which would be my film to start. So, A Bridge Too Far. So, I'll just give a little intro. Now, also for the sake of time, we're not going to be able to go super in-depth into these films. We're going to kind of brisk through them, try and get through as much as we can. But we're not going to spend...
This is not going to be an in-depth history lesson. Sorry, guys. You're going to have to go to another podcast for that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, but we'll give you a basic idea.
Sure. As much as we know, you know more than me, so you'll probably fill in gaps for what I say, I'm sure. But
yeah, but so A Bridge Too Far is directed by Richard Attenborough, and it concerns the later stages of World War II on the Western Front of it's sort of, I think they're in France and Belgium, and they're just trying to make their way into Germany. So this is they're starting to move towards Germany. They want to get into Germany so they can end the war by Christmas of 1944. This is the goal of the Allies. They want to end the war as fast as possible. That will minimize casualties. It'll make it war is expensive, so it'll also save them a lot of money. They want to end the war as fast as they can. Now, there are two commanders under Eisenhower. There are two commanders of the Western Front. You have Montgomery and Patton. Now, everyone probably knows who Patton is. He's a pretty famous guy. In fact, there's a whole biopic about him that we might be able to talk about at some point.
I would love to talk about that movie.
Considering it's a very good movie. But this actually concerns Montgomery. This was his plan to possibly use a sort of pincer movement to cut off German troops from the north and to create an entry point for the Allies right into Germany towards Berlin, because that was the goal. If you got Berlin, you got Hitler. If you got Hitler, you end the war. That's essentially how it went. So yeah, this was a pretty big deal. Now, as we were going to discuss in this movie, it didn't go as planned.
No.
Needless to say, this was probably the biggest colossal disaster of any military action that the Allies undertook during the entire war. It was a pretty big failure, actually, and it's still remembered today as a huge, colossal failure, and a really, really deadly one too. So it only made sense that eventually somebody would make a movie about it. Now this was covered in some movies beforehand, but this adaptation came out in the 70s, and war movies were starting to become popular again after a little lull. As you know, Kubrick with Full Metal Jacket was a similar time, and you have Apocalypse Now, which the Vietnam movies start coming out in the late 70s. Which you get a huge rush of those, including during the Vietnam War. That's the interesting thing about these wars. People forget that a lot of times these war movies are actually made during the wars, which is interesting. But this one, unlike The Longest Day, which was pretty close to the war still, this one took place like 3 decades later. So it does have a little bit more of a... It doesn't need to be too careful about being super pro-America. And there's actually some controversy as to the reviews maybe concerning how pro-Allies or anti-Allies the film was. So it's interesting little connotation there. We can get into later. But anyway, yeah, the film, I don't know. Have you seen The Longest Day?
I have not,
okay.
Unfortunately.
This movie is like The Longest Day, but like reversed. Like, it's very similar in structure to The Longest Day. They have the ensemble cast. You have the planning in the first part of the movie of the invasion, and then you have the invasion. Now, the difference is The Longest Day is about a victory, D-Day, right? So D-Day is extremely successful, bloody for sure, but successful, and ends up, starting the end of the war. Market Garden is the opposite. In fact, delays the war and holds up victory. So it's an interesting sort of comparison between the two movies, how they're tonally different in that way. So yeah, anyway, do you have any thoughts on any of this? I know I'm just kind of spouting off a bunch of knowledge.
Go ahead. It's actually interesting because I have failed my World War II history, apparently. I need to watch more documentaries. The funny thing is, it's not that I don't have an interest. Actually, revisiting Saving Private Ryan really makes me want to sit down and watch a bunch.
Yeah.
So there is that. I guess I just haven't. It's just one of those things. I don't know how best to say it. But anyway, this movie, Do we want to get into the movie, or are we just
Yeah.
talking about the history?
No, I think we've established history enough. Like we said, this is not a history podcast.
Sure.
I want to start out and say that the film's cast is incredible. Much like The Longest Day, you have huge names. I'm just going to list off the ones that I wrote down.
I want to say I love this cast. We were
Yeah.
sitting watching the movie, and I didn't know this cast going in, and I was just like, wait, he's in it? This person's in it? Oh my gosh, this is going to be a great movie. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I believe the whole cast is a fantastic job. You have Michael Caine, Gene Hackman, James Caan, Robert Redford, Laurence Olivier, Maximilian Schell, and particularly I think who did a fantastic job in this movie are Anthony Hopkins and Sean Connery. These two are really good in the movie. They have more screen time and they utilize it pretty well. And I actually really like these two in the movie, and they stand out for sure. Now, all of these actors portray different. Either they are real people. Some of these people are real people. Their characters' names are actual people who participated in the war.
I was guessing a couple of the generals were probably
Like Sean
real.
Connery is based on a real guy.
Okay.
Yeah, so others are based on a real person, but they changed the name. So it's sort of close, but it's not quite there. I don't know. Some debate as to what some of the real people actually asked them not to use their names.
Okay.
Particularly Maximilian Schell's character. Considering he was a Nazi, I understand maybe why he wouldn't want his real name used.
Would make sense, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. So the movie actually does do a lot to try and maintain historical accuracy. It portrays these characters in their real roles in the Market Garden military action, which is really cool to see this, and you actually get to see some scenes that are fictionalized but that actually might have happened in the way, because again, this is based on a book that really goes in depth into how this whole military action took place. So it's actually really cool. Now to get into the plot, so the movie starts out explaining where. So it does a little text thing, as a lot of these war movies do, explaining where they are in the war. And it starts off with just this, they're starting to plan, how do we end the war by Christmas? That's what they want to do. They want to be done by Christmas. So Montgomery, like I mentioned before, comes up with this plan to use this pincer movement to try and drop paratroopers like 100 miles past the front. And they would secure bridges. Now these bridges are really important because they not only do they serve as important transportation conduits for German troops, they can also be used by the Allies to spearhead themselves into Germany and, really finish the war. You need those bridges because you can't get any armor over water without bridges.
Sure.
And the Rhine was the big river they had to cross. So that was the plan, and then they would have so the market, what was called, is the paratroopers. They represented the airborne troops that were dropped, and then Garden was 30 Corps. This was the British military ground troops that would follow in on land, mixed with American forces, I think. There were some in there too. But they would spearhead on the ground in tanks and armor and meet up with these paratroopers to secure the bridges. And then they would have a highway to go into Germany, essentially. So that was the plan. Now the movie kind of goes through. There's doubts expressed about one of the characters. I can't remember who. This movie has a lot of cast. I apologize if I don't know the movie 100% very well. I've only seen the movie a few times. I really do like it though. I plan on seeing it again. So apologies for the lack of specificity. I hope I'm not confusing you, Sean. So one of the characters brings up, well, we should do more surveillance, right? Because we need to know a little bit more about where these guys are landing. Because the landing site they choose is actually quite far from the bridge. Because one of these bridges, the Arnhem Bridge, I think I'm saying that correctly, it's surrounded by buildings, and there's anti-air defenses to the north. So they need to pick this kind of weird, off 12 miles away landing site. And this guy's like,
I think it's Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman is the Polish general.
Is it not Gene Hackman? Okay,
no, yeah, Gene Hackman, I remember.
I know he brings up a lot, so I was thinking maybe it's Gene Hackman. But
he plays a Polish general, and he's pretty great. Okay. But no, I think it's an American.
Okay.
And so they take aerial surveillance, and they see that there are a bunch of panzers, i.e. German tanks, hidden in the trees. And the general is like, no, those are just non-working tanks. We're too far along. We gotta go. And this is one of the key points that the film presents as mistakes that they made, because oh crap, when they drop, oh boy, these tanks are active, and they are keeping the ground forces from doing any sort of movement up to the paratroopers. So they actually get backed up. So should we talk a little bit about the action stuff when it starts? Because that's probably the more exciting part of the movie.
Yeah.
Because again, the movie does a lot of explaining, which is good. It's important to have that stuff explained to us. As viewers, we need to understand the plan, because this is a specific movie that's trying to explain to you what happened exactly historically.
I think it's good to point out for people that may not be familiar with these kind of older movies, this movie has 70s pacing. It's kind of how I like to refer to it, in quotes. Which basically means you have a lot of build-up to some sort of action or sequence or something, but you have some build-up before.
Which The Longest Day did as well, and that was like 20 years before it.
So it's not 70s, but it's when, I guess I only came up with that because that's when I first noticed it in film. So that's where that's from. But anyway, basically just going into this, you should know it's longer paced. Now, that's not a bad thing. Actually, it works to this movie's advantage in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Some not so great ways. I'll get into that later. But
yeah, I'd love to hear
first
what you're talking
hour, I think, I don't mind that so much because I get to know the characters a little bit.
Yeah. And there are a lot of characters, so it's important to understand.
Absolutely.
Because we didn't mention this either. The movie tells the story from every perspective. It tells the story from the civilian perspective. It tells the story from the British perspective, the ground forces, the air forces, the German perspective. These are all told by the movie. The movie shows you everything. And it shows you the key errors and key decisions that went into what actually took place, which is really important for a viewer to understand, because it's hard to take a massive military event like this and make it digestible, even in a 3-hour movie. Right. That's tough. So I think what they did with the filmmaking and covering all the sides of the story is important. One particular moment I really like is when they're talking about, the Germans are discussing the strategy, and they're like, who's going to be spearheading this plan? And the general, the German general, he's like, oh, it's Patton. They're not that stupid to use Montgomery. Which is so funny, because it's kind of foreshadowing, oh, it was Montgomery. There's some moments like that which are really funny if you get into the movie enough to understand the plot and all that. So which I'll get into later. I love
the moment when the guy's like, "Oh, we don't need to worry about those tanks in the trees or whatever," and it's so obvious. Like, that's so foreboding, you idiot. Pay attention to that.
I know. Yeah,
but it's believable because who knows? But I don't know how much that is true to the real guy, but it could have happened. It seems like it did. If this was such a kind of failure.
As far as I understand, this is the kind of what happened. Unfortunately, they didn't take the worries of some of the subordinates too seriously. So, but let's get back to the action, because that's what I want to start talking about. So we start out with some pretty spectacular footage of these giant warplanes taking off on the runway.
Oh my gosh!
It was just unbelievable for the time. These kind of scale of shots.
Like I said, this is long, this is the 70s, so long before CGI.
Oh, yeah.
Nowadays, it'd all be done on a computer. You'd maybe get a few real planes in there.
Yeah, and literally what the production company did is they bought planes. They bought 10 planes, and they bought gliders, and they bought all this stuff for the production. And these things worked, and they were flown. Yeah. And the coolest thing is, during the paratrooping scenes, these are real people jumping out of real planes. And I think that this the paratroop sequence in the movie is not only breathtaking, it's a breathtaking scene, but it's really, really a parallel to the D-Day sequence of the Luftwaffe in The Longest Day. What a fantastic scene in The Longest Day, and this is their version of it. And to be fair, it's not as impressive as the Luftwaffe sequence in The Longest Day.
Okay.
But it's pretty close.
I wish I'd seen The Longest Day, so I know what you were talking about.
Yeah, actually,
but
now I've just rewatched Saving Private Ryan. I'll bring up The Longest Day again, but I want to compare those two movies a little bit because they're both about the same subject matter.
Okay.
At least at the beginning. of the Saving Private Ryan. So
yeah, no, I agree. It's really cool how they did that. I'm guessing some of them were mannequins. Or something.
It's hard It was hard for me to find information on it.
Just because there's so many in one
so
shot,
many
I gotta
of them.
believe they're not all real.
But I know
people.
that a lot of them were extras. So yeah,
Okay.
it was done with a
Interesting.
lot of real people. So then all these troops land, and one of my favorite scenes of the movie is they're regrouping on the ground, and it just so happens that nearby there have been some people have escaped from a nearby insane asylum, and they're just in the woods laughing hysterically and dancing around. And it's one of the creepiest things I've ever seen and most ominous.
It is very foreboding.
Yes,
like,
because
you guys are so screwed.
Because one of the characters remarks, well, maybe they know something we don't. And I love that line. It's like, yeah.
They do.
That is very, it's very thematic in that way. You know, it's the movie is establishing tension, which is really cool, you know, to see that kind of thing in a movie. A movie like being so, you know, this is the sequence of events, right? You know, for movies to take that liberty, artistic license or whatever, and show these kind of things to build tension, to build the atmosphere of the film and the world of the movie. Yeah, it's fantastic. I really do like that detail. So then things start to go wrong, right? The radios aren't working. They can't contact the right people. They don't know where some people have landed. Some people were at the wrong place. They finally reach the bridge, and then they have difficulties taking it. There's just a lot of stuff is going wrong. And one of the things that goes wrong I really like is one of the soldiers gets shot in the head, and James Caan, in probably one of my favorite scenes of the movie, picks this guy up, puts him on his Jeep, and drives miles, it seems, runs into a German patrol, quietly tries to sneak past them. It doesn't work. He drives crazily through a bunch of Germans, dodging bullets, finally reaches a camp and walks up to the local doctor, and he's like, you gotta look at this guy. And he's like, the guy's dead. And he's like, no, you gotta look at him. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. The guy's dead. And this is his superior, by the way. This doctor outranks him. And I love what he does. He closes the blinds, pulls out a gun, and says, you're gonna look at this guy right now. And threatens him at gunpoint. And then he does. And it turns out, yes, the guy's still alive. And he gets the treatment he needs. Looks like he's going to make it. And I love this sequence because James Caan just like hands him his gun. He's like, you know what? I'm going to take what punishment I did. I just did what I thought I needed to do. And then he looks like the doctor is like, he's saying, you got to be reprimanded. You understand? Everybody's going to think they can do this if you get away with it. So I got to arrest you. So he walks up to the military police officer and he's like, I want you to put this guy under arrest. You know, he pulled a gun on me and threatened me. And he's like, I want you to count to 10 and then let him go. I love that so much. And the guy's like, what? What are you talking about? He's like really confused. And then he's like, and it's just a nice moment because it shows, you know, he knew why James Caan did that. You know, he wanted to save this guy's life, and he thought it could have been saved, and he was right? Mm-hmm. So he was willing to do what it took. But then there's a really funny ending. He's like, you wouldn't have actually shot me, would you? And James Caan just gives him a look, and then just walks away. And then his face is like he goes cold. And
that is pretty funny.
I bring up this sequence because I think this is another point I had about Ryan as well, where sparse uses of humor are important in these films. It allows the audience to take a little breath.
Do you think, though, there's a level where it's a little too humorous?
Like I said, sparse.
Okay. Can I think Bridge Too Far? I don't know. Like, that was one of my things where I'm like, I like that sequence, and I think that was a good sequence, but I think there were too many other, like,
I think it's really well
moments.
spaced out. I don't think there's a lot of joke moments in the movie. There's a couple things that make you smile, but it's really well spaced out throughout the 3-hour piece.
There were parts of it, I guess.
I need
it
you to
felt
bring up
more
something
like
specific.
The Great Escape.
I need you to bring up an example.
Sure, no, it's just like, sure, later on in the movie it gets very serious, what's good.
Yeah, what's an example?
Earlier in the movie, it feels too much like, God, I don't know. I've only seen the movie once. Again, so you've seen it more.
I just need an example of what you're talking about.
I think it was just...
Because I honestly don't know what you're talking about, and I've seen the movie several times.
I know. I think there was just like a few too many little things of like people just joking around like this one guy being like, God, I don't even. Never mind. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to get at it. Just had a more lighter feel to the whole movie.
Well, yeah, the first half is lighter, but I think that's how the soldiers took it, and the tone turns when things go wrong, and that's what happens. And I think that's important.
Sure.
The movie gets more and more serious as time goes on. In fact, there's some really somber moments later in the movie that I don't know. I just don't know where you're coming from with that.
I don't know.
You're talking so generally too. I can't even debate you.
I understand. Maybe I'm wrong. Because I am thinking. I just thought of Full Metal Jacket after I started talking about that.
Full Metal Jacket has a lot of those
Full Metal
moments.
Jacket does that, and it works in Full Metal Jacket. So maybe I
think it works here.
I don't think it's too. It's not too distracting. It's more of a nitpicky thing. But it was just reminding me a little bit too much of The Great Escape, and I was like, well. Why does this feel like a fun adventure into German territory when this is based on a real war?
Well, like I said, I think it's an important change when things are going well versus when they start to go wrong, and then they go really wrong.
I know that was very general of me, so I apologize, but it was like, I just don't know how best to describe it. I'm trying to bring up my thoughts on
let's talk about the bridge sequence when they take the bridge. So there's moments when tanks are driving over the bridge, and then they're using a lot of explosions are going off. There's a lot of intense fighting in action. Some of these bridge sequences one of these particular sequences was dubbed the $1 Million Hour because the bridge can only be closed for a short period of time due to traffic. So essentially, they only had an hour to shoot this particular sequence. And if they went over this hour, it would have cost them up to $1 million to shoot additional footage because Robert Redford would have had to go overtime, essentially, and rework his movie schedule. They'd have to pay him more. They'd have to do the whole figure out the extras again. They'd have to rework all the explosives and all that. So essentially, they were going to finish this sequence, and that was it. They had to do it. So one of the funny directives Richard Attenborough gave was like, all right, if you're a soldier that's meant to die, you have to close your eyes, so we don't have any eye shifting or mistakes. So all of the dead soldiers, their eyes are shut because he did not want any mistakes in the background. He was a very detail-oriented director, which you can definitely tell in this movie. A lot of details here, which is really nice.
How much did Richard Attenborough direct? I know his acting work from like Jurassic Park and stuff, but
his most popular film is Gandhi, probably most well-known work, which won a bunch of Oscars. So very, very successful movie. He did films after this, nothing quite nearly the success level, but Richard Attenborough is most known for a lot of people for his acting, because he has many memorable roles throughout the years, which I really like him. So
okay.
Yeah, but
cool. No, I was just wondering, like a little bit, because I've not seen a lot from him as far as directing.
But yeah, Gandhi, that's a great one.
Okay,
I would definitely recommend that. So then essentially stuff starts to go wrong. I'm going to summarize a lot of this because there's just a lot of story.
Yep, go ahead.
We get some nice scenes with Laurence Olivier plays a sort of local doctor, and he's trying to care for all of these wounded soldiers. And they have filled up this poor woman's house who her husband is gone, and she is stuck with a house full of wounded soldiers because the army is like, hey, we need to put our wounded somewhere. Can we use your house? And she's like, sure.
Yeah. By the way, I just remembered you bringing this up, a couple sequences of what I was referring to earlier. One of them.
Whoa. Wait. Are we changing subject too much?
No, this is about that scene.
Okay.
Because I think there's a couple weird comedy moments in that sequence where, it cuts to the general talking to the husband of the woman, and there's almost a joking sequence, and it's like, she doesn't like loud noises. Well, you understand there's a war going on. And I'm like,
I thought that was funny.
It's funny, but why is it here?
I completely disagree.
I never got into the seriousness of the movie, and I'm like, is this a serious war film or is this Inglourious Basterds?
Okay, that's just going way too far. Like that's a tonal shift. It's not. It's just a little moment of comic relief, which movies like this need because they're really dark and serious movies. The audience, like I said, needs time to breathe. It needs a second to breathe every once in a while.
I understand seconds to breathe.
All of these war movies have these kind of things. They have moments where the audience can relax and breathe, take a breath, have a little chuckle. You know, it's not a tonal shift. It doesn't take you out of the movie. It feels right in the scene, right? The dialogue isn't making a parody reference or anything like that.
It's not. That's
I think you're being unfair to this movie because I think Saving Private Ryan does that too. In fact, in some of the most intense sequences, there's some humor. So I'm just curious as to why you think there's a huge difference between the two.
I guess it felt like a joke out of a different movie, though. Is my point.
It didn't at all, though. I don't think it did. I think it really fit because it's kind of that line in particular. If you want me to defend this, is well, sure, a person might not like loud noises, right? And then it's kind of showing that war changes everything. And even though a normal, your normal everyday life might say, I don't really enjoy loud noises. Well, sorry, it's going to come on your doorstep, which is kind of evocative of what happens to her with the army. They show up on her doorstep and they're like, we need your house.
Okay.
Can we bring our wounded there?
Yeah, and then later on we see her just wander out of the house and get shot. She's trying to get to a taxi that she thinks is outside.
No, that's a completely different woman. That's by the
I
bridge.
thought that was the same woman.
No,
really?
Because the woman who takes them into the house is at the very last scene in the movie, actually. She leaves her destroyed house and walks with her family. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Never mind.
There.
They look.
That
I thought
woman
that was the
is
same
a
person.
German civilian who is not friends with the enemy.
Okay, I didn't realize that
Allies.
those were different people. They looked so
No,
similar.
that woman is much older.
Okay.
It's obviously much older in the movie.
All right.
I don't know how
I
you
don't know.
missed
I
that,
guess
man.
I missed that.
Yeah, don't know how. But anyway, let's go back to the scene I was trying to talk about, which is with Laurence Olivier. And he's basically saying, these guys are not going to get the medical care they need because I can't treat them. And he asked Sean Connery, he's like, can I treat these guys? Like, I'm not the one you need to worry about. It's the Germans you got to convince. He's like, I'm fine with it. I'm totally cool. You got to go convince them to take these guys in. Because Sean Connery's like, I don't think they're going to agree to a ceasefire. Right? So he goes over there and he's debating with this German who's not giving him a lot. He's like saying, no, this is ridiculous. Why would we do this? And then Maximilian Schell's character, I can't remember the character's name, but he's one of the generals we've seen in the German army. He walks up to Laurence Olivier. He's like, we'll let you do it. We're going to give this to you. So they agree to an armistice, and all these wounded file over to the German side to be at treatment in a hospital. And it's a really interesting sequence because that starts where the failure of the whole thing starts to set in, that these American troops can't even get proper care by their own army. They need to go over to the enemy to get proper medical care.
Yeah. There is an earlier sequence that explains why these planes are supposed to be giving them supplies, but they're at the wrong marker just because they weren't able to get to where they were supposed to be. And so these planes they're told not to follow any markers on the ground because they could be German. So even though these soldiers are trying to get their attention, they won't.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes of the movie is when one of the soldiers actually decides to go out and try and secure one of the drops that landed pretty close to them. So he runs out in the field and all the soldiers are cheering like, come on, you can do it, you can do it. He runs out, he grabs the drop, and it's really heavy. He kind of lifts it over his head, his shoulder. He's running back with it, and of course, Germans start opening fire. They shoot him. He goes down, and he dies. And it's in front of this whole, battalion of troops. And the sad thing is, it opens and it's full of hats.
Yeah.
So
he died for nothing.
Basically died for nothing, which is really kind of sad. And it just shows, I think that moment is one of the best scenes in the movie that just shows the disorganization and the lack of cohesion.
I love stuff like that. That was great.
In this whole military action.
Yeah.
And I love how this film portrays that stuff. And some of the war stuff is brutal and some of it is intense, and it gets your heart going. There's shots of civilians getting brutally murdered in the streets, and it's really sad. And Remember the moment when the father picks up his son who is,
Oh, gosh.
hurt and lays him down in this pile of dead people. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is brutal stuff. And, I love these sequences. And the battle scenes are massive. They're all over the streets. They have night battles, which are interesting. They're all shot, look very realistic, very credible. I really loved how Richard Attenborough shot this movie. It's all from... It's not like Ryan, where it's very unrestrained.
Well, let's talk about Ryan in a minute.
Well, I'm comparing the movies.
Okay.
It's not like Ryan, where it's very unrestrained and handheld, but that was less common at the time. It was more put on the pedestal, put on a tripod. But Richard Attenborough wanted to go for sort of a documentary style to the whole thing, like as if it's a war reel.
It did feel like that, absolutely. And yeah, I love the feeling of isolation for the different battalions of soldiers just are stuck and they can't get help, they can't get out. And when they finally get a radio, it's like you almost want to cheer. You're just like, yes, finally they can get some help, or at least figure out a way to get out of there.
And you really get the idea that the enemy could be around any corner, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no safe ground in this entire area. They're trapped. These people are trapped essentially for just no question that these people are in a bad situation. And then like we were saying, I want to talk about the ending to wrap it up, because there's a scene where one of the planners is like, I always thought we were going one bridge too far, and that's of course the title of the movie, but it also is kind of evocative that they overextended themselves and they got too confident. And then the movie, like I said, mentioned before, beautifully ends with this woman who lent her house walking out with her family among this destroyed, ruined countryside. And it's a really nice scene, and it's a really quiet way to end this movie.
Touching ending to the movie. And just briefly, the acting in this movie is incredible. Gene Hackman, Robert Redford, and James Caan all have brilliant performances, as well as people I'm not thinking. Yeah, I'm blanking on other names, of course, but as I can tell by your expression that you're giving.
No, keep going.
Everyone did an amazing job in this film, and that was great. My only, I guess, if I were to have to say a negative about this movie, some of the pacing later on in the second half got a little bit like, okay. There was nothing really specifically that was like, this feels paced badly, but it was just more like it felt a little bit dragging on. It was like, okay, and now they're still stuck, and now they still can't get out. And I'm like, okay, it's probably realistic, but where could you have trimmed a little bit of it? It wasn't so bad, but it's like, if I can nitpick the movie, there's that. I felt the pacing a little more in the second half, ironically, than the first half. Because you'd think it'd be in the first half where you're like, oh, let's just get to the action. But honestly, no. I thought the first half was quite interesting, just seeing them kind of plan everything.
Yeah, I really like the second half because it's juggling so many storylines and it's telling them well. And I think some of the genius of casting really well-known people is who they all are. So it's not like you're faced with all these blank faces that you're trying to associate to names. It's like, this is Sean Connery. Yeah. Oh, this is James Caan. Oh, this is, Michael Caine. So these people going in, so you have that reference point, so you can tell them apart. Yeah. And I wanted to bring up one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I have a lot of these, I'm sorry, is when they gave up at Arnhem Bridge, and they're just sitting down, and I think it's Shell who walks up to Anthony Hopkins, and he offers him chocolate. And I love that scene, because it's just two enemies coming together. One side's admitting defeat, but they're both humble, and they have a little moment together, and I like those kind of scenes.
Yeah, it's a very human moment. It's like, you know what, human to another human. I know we're fighting, but here, you look hungry. Here's a bit of food. Yeah,
and again, I really like Anthony Hopkins in the movie, and
absolutely,
he does a great job, and I just think all of these, the types of way they tell the story it's really passionate, obviously. About the history, but also talks a little bit about humanity too. So it gets a good mix. You're not going to textbook style,
No,
reading.
no.
It's not like you're reading a military.
Oh, absolutely not. No, it
U.S.
feels
history
like a
textbook.
movie.
Yeah, but at
in
the
a
same
good way,
time,
yeah.
it does a good job at recounting all the events that happened, and it gives you an understanding of how this happened and why it happened, and what were the mix of factors: bad luck, bad planning, negligence. All of these factors contributed. And for such a complicated event to be so well understood after viewing the movie, I think it's a testament to the filmmaking and what Richard Attenborough did. So I really like the film. So I don't know. I'll let you give your final thoughts.
Oh, I like the film as well. I don't like it as much as you, but you're more into the history of it all. I think that helps. As just a war movie, I think it is interesting, and apart from a couple jokes that maybe it's just that the jokes didn't land. Maybe that's what it was. That they just felt weird and out of sequence in those moments.
Okay.
And a slight pacing, like feeling a little ongoing by the end. I enjoyed most of the movie, and I love the spectacle of it all, and it really put you in the moment of the war. And
Okay.
I enjoyed it for that. Not as much, though, as the next movie we're about to talk about.
Yeah,
Saving
so
Private Ryan.
my final thoughts.
Sorry. I thought those were your final thoughts. My bad.
I just
Go
wanted
ahead.
to sum it up. Yeah, I really enjoyed the movie, and I understand that a lot of people have problems with the length. A 3-hour movie is a 3-hour movie. It can be tough to sustain a running time of that length. Generally, movies are a full hour shorter than that in a typical movie. It's so interesting that we're talking about movies of various running times in this podcast. This will be interesting to discuss. 2 for the length and the longness, and 1 for the shortness. So yeah, that'll be interesting. But this is a long one. But I think it works because there's so much story to tell. It tells it from all the different perspectives, and each perspective is interesting. There's nothing that's boring. It's not like it's cutting back to this certain group and it's like, oh no, we're back to these guys.
No, yeah, ones. None of the groups are like, oh gosh, these idiots or something.
And all of the storylines tie into each other too. It's not like these people are worlds apart. Every storyline feeds into each other, and you get a whole understanding of the whole event as a cohesive whole. It's not like you're going off to complete different stories, right? This isn't like an anthology thing. It's still one narrative. It's just told from many different perspectives.
Sure.
And that's what I think the movie does so well. And it is cohesive, and it feels like you're watching one event as opposed to many different little events. And I think that's a testament to the quality of the film. So I really like the film. Yeah, I understand your problems with it. I understand it's not for everybody, but I think it's a film that's really underrated, and a film that
I would agree with that. I think it's a film that people should see.
People should definitely see.
Sure.
If you're gonna watch The Longest Day, you should watch this one too. I kind of hold them in the same regard personally.
Which one do you like better?
Well, like I just said, I kind of hold them in the same regard.
Okay,
so,
sorry, I was okay. Never mind.
That's an interesting question. They're very similar yet very different movies.
Okay.
I think we'll talk about Longest Day during Private Ryan.
Sure.
But
right.
I think that movie is the slightly more impressive film just because of the scope and scale of the thing is incredible. So,
all right.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to
your film,
1998, with Saving Private Ryan. A couple decades later, Steven Spielberg makes a war film that's centered around D-Day. Now, a couple things on this. This is the movie that won Spielberg's second Best Directing Award. He won his first from, of course, Schindler's List. This is a movie that was first written by Robert Rodat in 1994.
Yep, who wrote The Patriot.
So,
not super well known for historical accuracy.
He has not written a lot of great scripts, but it came across Spielberg's desk, basically. And Spielberg grew up in a home. He was the son of a veteran. His father flew a B-52 in World War II. And so he grew up hearing a lot of war stories, a lot of stories about D-Day and what war was like and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so he was there inspired to make a movie like this when he read the script. Now, Saving Private Ryan, I read, sorry if you can hear that paper, I'm trying not to. This film is loosely based on Sergeant Frederick Neeland, who fought for the first few days of the Normandy campaign but was sent home after his 3 brothers were killed. Now, I couldn't find a lot of information if, like, a specific battalion of men went and found him or anything like in the movie. It is loosely based. It did also turn out that one of his brothers was still alive.
Yeah, he was in a camp in Burma. He was in a in a prison camp, and there's no way they could have known he was alive until after the war.
Of course.
So even his brother thought he was dead until after the war.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a film that was made at the time that incorrectly lists his brother as dead, because they do talk about that story because it was interesting at the time. So even all the media thought he was dead, but it was a big happy surprise.
Yep. That was quite interesting to read about because I'd always wondered if that was based on a true story or not. But anyway, Spielberg, when casting, wanted his actors to look as if they came right out of a World War II newsreel, and I think he succeeded in that, I'll argue. He also had several of them, most of them went through a acting boot camp of such where they were trained to specifically act in a military movie by an ex-military.
Yeah, which is interesting because A Bridge Too Far, which came out in the 70s, that was one of the first movies to ever use a boot camp for the actors. Richard Attenborough actually had his actors go through a boot camp. This was not a traditional type of thing. These days, it's become almost commonplace for actors to undergo physical training for military movies, including, by actual military people.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, Spielberg did not do it in order to...
No, I was just going to bring that up, actually.
In order to train them to be, like, accurate, to military,
right.
action.
No.
He wanted them to form a bond as a group of actors, notably excluding Matt Damon.
Right.
Yeah.
The reason is because Matt Damon was supposed to be this guy they're looking for, and he wanted the actors to kind of have a disdain for him.
A natural source of tension,
and for that to come through on the film.
Yeah, which is very interesting, and it's a good...
it was a good directorial choice, I think, because it does display on the film and several characters, of course, because the whole point is, why are we doing this for this one guy?
Yeah.
And also just to experience what it must have been like to be a soldier. Because obviously these are all Hollywood actors. They would have no idea what that's like.
Unless they were an actual soldier.
Well, that's true. Some of them are. There are a few. It's funny. I found out Tom Hanks and Spielberg, they came to this movie independently. Which is lucky, because had that not happened, Spielberg never wanted to work with Tom because they were friends. And he didn't want... Neither of them wanted to work together. They didn't want to mess with that personal friendship. But then I guess they were like, we both like this script, let's do it. So lucky they came to that independently. I'm really happy that happened, because otherwise Tom Hanks would not be in this movie. And he is phenomenal in this movie. I think that's it I want to bring up for now. But I'll bring up the last few notes I have, and let's get into the movie. If you want. This movie, for those who don't know, the plot is... based around D-Day, basically the campaign of Normandy, the beginning of which Tom Hanks plays a general, or a... Captain.
Not a general.
Sorry. A captain who is tasked with leading a battalion of men to find one man.
He's leading a squad. He was leading a battalion, and he was taken out of command because 95 men were killed under his command.
Right. Mind you, I have not recently watched the movie. Shane, you recently watched it, so I guess I should note that.
Yeah, so a lot of men were killed underneath his last command, so he was relegated to this squad and this sort of quote-unquote unimportant mission to find this private.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where his role is coming from.
Yeah, so he leads this small squadron of men to find this guy so that he can go home. And a lot of the movie is basically about whether or not they should do this for one guy, what's the point? And they go through they encounter several different situations along the way, including a German gunner and...
Wait. Are we gonna go through this movie?
It starts off actually in present day, 98, where we see Ryan as a
we don't know who it is.
Well, we don't know who it is yet.
Which is important.
You're right.
Because I wonder if they purposely did that, which is why I think it's important to mention that you don't know. Because all you see is a man walking in a sort of park we figure out that it's a military cemetery, and he sees a grave, stops before it, and he starts tearing up and losing it. And that's all we really get. And we zoom into his eyes, and whose eyes do we see right away? Tom Hanks' eyes.
That's true.
So the movie's kind of trying to make you think this is Tom Hanks, who was there. And that's why I really wanted you to be careful with that, because I think that's what Spielberg is trying to do.
Well, again, I couldn't watch this movie before our podcast because we just needed to do this podcast. I didn't have time. Unfortunately, you got to watch it, though.
Too busy watching Galaxy Quest, huh?
Hey, that movie is awesome. And shut up.
Just want to point out, not enough time is a very big stretch. You haven't seen Galaxy
Quest. It's pretty good. But anyway. Anyways, yeah, no, so starts off with the U-boats heading to the beaches of Omaha Beach, and that sounded stupid, but basically to begin the battle. And right away, we get the doors open up and gunfire immediately. We get soldiers running, getting shot down, and the one thing I really love about this movie, and this movie's been credited by a lot of people, not only critics, but military men, vets of World War II, that this movie's very realistic to what World War II was actually like and this battle was like. Even PTSD clinics saw a rise after this movie came out because soldiers saw this movie and just couldn't handle it. They walked out of the theater.
Yeah, it's pretty intense and detail-oriented. You have things like some of these soldiers are throwing up due to seasickness while they're going to the beach. These are very important details that actually happened. When the doors open, you have a massive amount of people dying at once because some of these boats were directly targeted by machine guns, killing dozens of people in the first few seconds.
A couple of them, just the door opens and they're just plowed down with machine gun bullets. And it's some terrifying stuff. And one thing I want to say up front about the action in this movie, none of it ever feels like fun Hollywood action. It was very important for Spielberg. He says this in the bonus features. He wanted this to feel like real war, and war is hell. He wanted this to feel like that. Mm-hmm. And now I'm going to make a comparison to another war movie that came out a couple years later, Pearl Harbor, by Michael Bay, who is a much less talented director. That's saying that's not even hitting the surface of that. But Michael Bay, Pearl Harbor is very stylized and it's like any other Michael Bay movie. And if you compare the two movies and the action, those sequences, you will see a definite comparison of how the action is shot. The action in Pearl Harbor is shot fun, explosions and stuff, even though it's a horrible, tragic situation, which, side note, is just disgusting to do.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg, of course, respected what was going on, and so you see the shots linger more on the people who are shot and wounded, and you see the handheld cam making it feel like you're almost there watching these men die around you. It gives a very much you're in the action itself. I don't know if this was the first. I mean, it's not shaky cam, but it may have been a slight inspiration. It feels like a step towards shaky cam we would see in later action movies, like the Bourne movies and whatnot. But I think, it's not the same thing, obviously, but it feels like it's stepping in that direction almost.
I mean, handheld cam was used before this and after this.
No, I know, but I guess, no. Okay. But the concept of moving the camera around so that you feel like you're in the action.
Okay.
I think that's all I'm getting at.
Well, let's talk about Janusz Kaminski's cinematography then in this movie, because there's a lot to talk about here. I'm surprised that you didn't bring this up right away, but his cinematography is probably one of the most, if not the most, important element in the immersion of the film. Mm-hmm. Spielberg wanted you to feel like you were part of the movie, that you were a soldier on Omaha Beach, that you were with this squad. And he utilizes Kaminski very effectively. What Kaminski does is he does a lot of one-take shots, oneers, as people typically call them. There are a lot of long-running takes of just... And there are a lot of them are just following the squad as they're walking through these battlefields. And it's really immersive because you actually feel like you're one of these guys, boots on the ground, really walking through these battlefields and really experiencing all this bullet fire and explosions going off around you. And boy, it's great. You know, this is one of those movies where it's like you got to have that sound cranked up. You got to have that stereo sound. You feel the bullet whizzing past your left and right ears, and it's just an incredible immersive experience. And I think Kaminsky did a fantastic job here, and I think it's my favorite film of his, just based on what he was able to accomplish with that cinematography. And yeah, like you said, even though it's shaky, you're not like feeling sick. You feel like you're there.
Yeah.
Like, of course it's shaky.
Distraction.
There's bombs going off 5 feet away from you. It should be shaky.
I was saying that as a compliment. I was certainly not complaining about that.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's what I love about this film, is that I feel like I am there in that situation. You know, it should be said, no matter how well the filmmaking is in a movie, I can't, no one can fathom who hasn't been there. I certainly have never been in war. I can't imagine the fear and the terror that must be. But it is, like any great movie, it can give you that little bit of, you can kind of take a peek at it. You get that little bit of this, it's a centimeter of what it must have been like a little droplet of the feeling that these soldiers must have felt. And I think that's what makes this movie very powerful. Absolutely. And that's
part of it. Sure.
Yeah, part of it. And then moving on, moving on the plot, we get, they eventually get to a point where they're able to fight back against the German soldiers.
It's all basically almost real time sequence when they breach the barbed wire fence. They get up to where the bunker is and they take out the bunker, which is based on some real events that happened on D-Day. So the movie is doing a good amount to try and stay realistic.
Okay.
So that is nice. And it is very intense. The whole sequence is. But you're right. They finally get up on top of the hill with great difficulty and great amount of death, which we see. There are people who just have guts spilling out of them, screaming for their mother.
Oh my gosh. There's this guy that's like shot. He like barely hanging on to life.
That's the guy I brought up.
Yeah, that's the guy you brought
mother.
up, and that's such a terrifying scene.
There's a shot when one of these soldiers gets hit in the helmet with a bullet, and it knocks his helmet off, and he's like, "Oh, lucky bastard!" And he gets shot through the head and dies right after that. Yeah, so this is the kind of stuff, and this is a violent movie. Let's get that out of the way. This is an intense, violent, R-rated movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And Bridge to Var was a bit violent. This is way more violent. This is really intense stuff.
Absolutely. And then you have little moments of Tom Hanks is just surveying the carnage and surveying the battle around him, and he gets shell-shocked, and they have a cool sound effect where it's just like all the sound kind of gets muffled around him, but you have this like, how best to describe it? Like just this, like, God, I'm going to butcher the description of this, but like you just have this certain sound that it signifies like muffling everything around him, so it almost feels like you're in his head and just experiencing it how he is experiencing.
They do it later too at the end of the movie, so it is done twice, and I really like those moments. It quiets the movie down, but you keep that intensity. Basically,
okay, I'm gonna sound stupid for 5 seconds. If you want to know the description of it, play a war video game. They use that a lot in Call of Duty. Sorry. 5 seconds of stupidity over. But I think that's true. That it's a very good effect, and it allows us to get inside that character's head. Now, moving on, yes, then they eventually get through Omaha Beach, and then we get a bit of quickly settling down as everyone regroups, and Tom Hanks' character is giving orders to find this guy, Private Ryan.
Oh, whoa, wait. Slow down.
I haven't seen this movie in a year. Give me a break.
Slow down, man.
Okay,
Shane,
you're skipping. This is my favorite movie, but you go for it. You tell me the plot.
Well, no. It's not the plot. You're just missing an incredibly important part of the movie. So, there is a scene where these women are typing up letters to dead soldiers. Basically, it's almost like a factory they got going of letters going out to all of these families for their dead loved ones, which is what they had to do back then. So many people were dying. These letters weren't actually written by whoever they were signed by, right? You had to have people actually writing out these form letters. Now, one of the women notices something and shows it to a little role by Bryan Cranston here. Shows it to Bryan Cranston, who is person in charge of this whole operation of, notification of loved ones. And she's like, look, these 3 brothers were all killed in the span of the last 3 weeks, and they're all from the same family. Which kind of shocks them all, and they bring it to this... I think he's like the Secretary of State. I can't remember his name. I think he's a real character too. I think the movie doesn't really say it that much, but they bring it to him, and they're like, there's a 4th brother who's still alive, but he's in Normandy right now. He's part of the trooper, battalion. And I think that this is actually the best scene in the movie right here, which is interesting because it has nothing to do with anything else. But it's so powerful, Sean. I can't start to even describe how much I love this scene. They argue. Bryan Cranston is like, we should probably bring him home. How would we look if he died after all of them died, and then she'd have nobody, And then you have this other guy who's like, I don't know, you'd be risking a lot of resources just to find this guy, who might already be dead, by the way. And even if you do find him, you might lose a bunch more lives just to get to that guy. So he's like, I don't think it's worth the risk. And you just see this deep look of knowledge in the secretary's face. He turns around, pulls out a book. In the book's a letter. And he's like, I'm going to read this letter to you that was written a little while ago. So, and he's like, just humor me. And he reads this letter. And it's from a man who we don't know at the beginning, writing to a mother of 5, who all 5 of her sons were killed in battle. And he's just going through this letter and just saying, and the letter writer says, I don't know how I could ever console you or give you any sort of anything that could possibly comfort you from your grief. And I don't think I ever could. That's impossible. But here's what I'll say. Your sons died defending the Republic, their country, and they're heroes. And then he's like, the writer is consoling. And then at the very end, he's like, signed very humbly, Abraham Lincoln. And there's just this lovely silent moment. And by the way, halfway through the letter, this is really subtle. You miss it pretty easily if you don't look. The secretary looks up. He's not reading the letter anymore. He has it memorized, which is really powerful. This guy has this letter memorized. And then you see around the room, the 2 of the men, they're just silent, Bryan Cranston. And then the guy who was arguing against rescuing Ryan, he gives a little nod. A nod of, you're right, we got to do this. And it's what a powerful moment. And he's like, you're going to go rescue Ryan. You're going to bring him home.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's incredible. And this is intercut with a sequence of Ryan's mother watching a car pull up to her driveway. It's a priest and a military officer notifying her silently. We don't have any dialogue. It's all told from just visuals that her sons are dead. And I love the moment when she just sits down and just, can't contain her grief and just crumples to the floor. And she knows from the first time she sees that car what it means, But seeing her slowly collapse is really powerful. Now we know we have emotional investment in finding Ryan.
And it's more powerful when you think about it, because it's like, she may be thinking, okay, oh God, which one of my sons is it? No, it's 3 of your sons.
Yep.
You have 1 left.
Like, could you imagine that kind of thing happening? Yeah. And you remember this scene now that I bring it up?
Yes, and I feel like an asshole.
Okay.
And I almost want to stop the podcast and be like, you know what, I'm going to watch this movie And we'll do this another day.
No, I understand that it's not super fresh in your mind. I just wanted to bring it up.
I just want to apologize to our listeners, because I know our listeners are going, God, this guy must not really like this film. He can't remember the damn movie. Screw this guy.
I just wanted to point it out because it's really literally my favorite scene in the movie. So I just wanted to get it out there.
Okay. Maybe you should do the plot, because you just watched it, to be fair, so it's more fresh in your memory.
Oh, we're staking general anyway, so if you need help, let me know, but we can keep going.
All right. Well, yes, after that really good scene that I forgot like an idiot, we get to Tom Hanks talking to the general. I don't know who plays the general who gives him the orders or where he gets the orders, but
I don't remember either.
Yeah,
it's not a very long scene.
Yeah, it's a pretty short scene, and he gets the orders like, there's this guy, his brothers just got killed, and we want to get him out of there. He's somewhere in Normandy. We think he's in this battalion of men. He parachuted in. We need to get him out of there. And we need you to be the one to bring a squadron and do it. And reluctantly, he's like, okay, I got to do it. And he talks some men into it. He gets an interpreter. He does all that.
Oh, wait. There are some details here I want to point out. So
Okay.
He assembles some people he knows from his company. And he needs someone who speaks German and French. So he's like, what about this guy? Dad, what about this guy? Oh, he's gone.
Oh, gosh.
And,
yeah.
And then he's like, wait, what about him? Oh, he died this morning.
I
I love Tom Hanks' reaction. Not an emotional, not a beat. He doesn't miss a beat. He just moves on. He's like, okay, we got to find a new guy. And that's literally what these guys did. Mm-hmm. Death was so common to these guys.
Yeah.
That somebody dying, it doesn't even occur to you anymore because you're so used to it. You get,
You almost get jaded in a way.
Well, yeah, it just doesn't hurt you anymore because you're so used to it. You get accustomed to it. You know, oh, of course they're dead. You're in war. People die, and that what makes the scenes where we do see death later even more powerful. When we do see an emotional reaction, we know what it means now because somebody, an acquaintance, is not going to get a reaction at all from these people. So now we get more power from those scenes. But yes, then he finds. What's his name? Upham, of course, Upham. How could I forget? Yes, he finds Upham, who was a translator. Just seems like he just got there. He's a brand new face. Like he's a really young guy. He said he had no combat experience, but Tom Hanks takes him because he speaks German and French. He's like, "Do you have an accent?" And he's like, "No." Not my German. French, I have a little bit. He's like, oh, okay, that's perfect. Which I love. So he assembles this little group, and they're going to go out and march across the countryside to try and find the landing site that Ryan would have parachuted to. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the biggest historical inaccuracy in the movie. That the screenwriter admits, everyone admits, it's intentional. The thing is, it would have made 0 sense to get soldiers from Omaha Beach. Omaha Beach is much, much, much further away from where the paratroopers actually dropped in to the continent than Utah Beach. You would have just gotten someone from Utah. It just makes much more sense. They would have had to go through enemy territory, like dense enemy territory. Right. They would have probably been killed if they were told to get these
more
guys.
Than is shown in the movie. Yeah, definitely. Okay.
The reason they didn't do it is they wanted to show Omaha Beach because Utah was a pretty smooth landing. They got on the beach, very little resistance, not a lot of casualties, and it was very successful. Omaha Beach was almost a massacre. It was bloody. It was horrible. Spielberg wanted to show that on screen.
It was lucky that the Americans took the beach at all.
Yeah. So they wanted that to be in the movie.
Now, curious, I mean, I'm sure you're getting to it anyways, but does that bother you? Like the historical inaccuracy, or do you think it's okay for the film that they're trying to tell?
I think it's fine. You kind of have to, if you were there, it might be like, what? I don't know about that. But, I mean, to people who are just not as familiar with the history, I think it's a very short little blip.
Knowing that, I'm just like, okay, but
it's done in service of the story, and I understand why.
They need to have that sequence.
Yeah.
To really drive home what the hell these guys have already gone through, and then the hell they're going to go through. So yeah, I'm okay with it, obviously, but I was just curious. So yeah, they They start walking. They start trekking across the countryside to get to this battalion. And yeah, there's several conversations along the way of why are we doing this exactly? Who is this Ryan to you? Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about this movie is this Ryan is nobody. He's not a sergeant or a general, and he's no one to any of these people.
Yep.
And so
yeah, they're all risking their lives.
They're all risking their lives, and that's a big point of like, not quite tension, but questioning. It's like,
well, it is a point of tension.
Well, it's a point of tension, but it's not like no one's at Tom Hanks's throat. Like, why the hell are you dragging me along to do this? You know, that's what I meant. But yeah, it's and it's interesting because they kind of they all have different reactions to it. I think one of them's just like, I just want to go kill Nazis almost. He's almost like a Brad Pitt and Glorious Bastards type character to a point.
Yeah.
And then you have others that are just like, I've already seen enough hell. I don't want to do this. But you're telling me I have to, so I'll do it. And it's interesting, too, is we don't know much about Tom Hanks' character. We know he's a sergeant. We know he lived in Philadelphia.
It's played up as a mystery. Like, there's a betting pool to figure out where he lives and what he does for a living. And this is the big secret of their little company, is that they're trying to figure it out. And the pool gets pretty big. It gets pretty hefty sum, whoever can guess correctly. So it's kind of a running joke is, how much money this is. This is why I found it interesting, because this movie has humorous moments like that. Where
it does, but I felt like that. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to rehatch our last movie, but I feel like that felt a little more in keeping with what these guys probably would have been talking about and joking about. Yeah. I don't know. It felt a little more real to me. That's all. But yeah,
disagree on that.
You're right. That's fine. So what happens next? Since you just watched the movie.
Well, they get to this village, which is very, very under a lot of hostility. They're fighting pretty brutally, Germans and the Americans. So you have, this is the famous sniper tower scene where there's a sniper on the roof, and it's a really intense scene because, first of all, I should say what happens is they meet up with these guys. And they know that this is the company that might know where Ryan is. Mm-hmm. So they see this family in a house. And Vin Diesel, who's one of the...
Yeah, this is Vin Diesel's first movie, by the way.
So Vin Diesel notices that there's a child there. And the parents are like, here, please take our child. And Tom Hanks says, no, don't take the children. We can't do it.
Right, but Vin Diesel wants to.
But, he feels like it's
the
right thing to do.
It's like, we can't let this kid stay
So he starts to take this child. Tom Hanks is yelling at him, stop, don't do it. What are you doing? Because Tom Hanks is really concerned about the lives of his own men. He's like, we can't worry about them. We have to worry about ourselves. And in the end, it ends up that, as a direct result of this, Vin Diesel ends up getting shot by a sniper. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty brutal scene because these guys can't go out because there's a sniper watching. So they basically watch Vin Diesel die slowly in front of them from a bullet wound, which is pretty intense. And eventually their sniper takes out the enemy sniper in probably one of the most iconic deaths in the movie, where he's shot through the sniper scope of his sniper, which Mythbusters did test and prove that is impossible. So, but it looks cool.
You know what? It looks cool. So shut up, nitpicky.
I'm just
people. No, not you, but nitpicky people that would be like, "Oh no, he shot him through a sniper scope. It's not realistic."
Yeah. So that's their first death. They already have encountered their first death. Not too far in. They meet up. And then they finally... Oh, by the way, during this whole sequence, we get to see a lot of Paul Giamatti, who makes a nice little...
Yeah, that's right.
Show in this sequence. And also, guess who happens to be the captain of this other company? None other than Ted Danson is the captain, which is really funny to see him in this, because I was just watching Cheers the other day. And I'm like, wow, that's Ted Danson. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I hope you know who I'm talking
about.
No,
I know who Ted Danson is.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Making sure. And then, of course, they're like, hey, do you have Private James Ryan here? Oh, yeah. He's right over here. And then they...
Wrong guy.
Well, I was getting to that.
It's funny because this guy comes over.
And it's not just this guy. let's point out another interesting cameo. We have Nathan Fillion as the wrong James Ryan, which before he was known for anything. I think this is when he was just a nobody.
No, I don't know who this is.
Nathan Fillion?
No.
Star of Firefly and Serenity?
Never seen. I've seen Serenity, the movie.
Yeah, star of the movie.
I've seen Serenity once, a long
He's
long
the main
time ago.
character of Firefly?
I don't remember it too
Wow. Yeah, okay. Well, it's Nathan Fillion, very young Nathan Fillion, as James Ryan. And Tom Hanks has this emotional scene. I don't know how to tell you this, but your brothers are dead. And he just chokes up and starts crying. He's like, how did it happen? And he's like, they were killed in action. And he's like, that's not possible. They're in grammar school. And he's like, you're James Frederick Ryan. And like, no, I'm this guy. I'm from Minnesota. And it's like, oh, we got the wrong guy. Well, never mind. So my brothers aren't dead? And he's like, no, they're not dead. We mixed it up. Like, are you sure? I want to go home. He's like still worried that his brothers are dead. Right. Oh, that's really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a interesting little bit where they find the wrong guy. So they got to keep going. Yeah. Not that easy, right?
No, unfortunately not.
So you keep going from here.
So they keep going, and then they come across a hill, and I don't remember exactly what gives it away, but they think there could be a gunner over there. It makes sense to be a good spot.
There's a old radar station, and underneath is...
Oh, that's right. They see the old radar station. They're like, there could be someone still in there. We don't know.
Well, they know it's a fortified position. They know that there are soldiers in there, and they know that attacking it would be dangerous.
So it's like, okay, go around, or what do they do? And I believe they try going around first, right? No.
Every soldier is like, hey, we gotta...
Oh, that's right.
We gotta move on. This is not our mission, And then Tom Hanks is like, no, we're gonna take this out. And he's like, and there's a lot of dispute about this. And Tom Hanks in the end is like, we got to take it out. What? Are we going to let them, ambush the next patrol? And because remember, they saw dead bodies in front of this area.
You're right.
So they know that people have already been killed by these guys.
I swear I'm a fan of this movie, guys. I know it doesn't sound like it, but I swear I am.
So Tom Hanks comes up with a plan for basically them to try and flank this position, throw grenades in, try and take these guys out. You want to keep going? Sorry, I don't want to take it over from you.
Yeah, so they attack. They eventually, after losing a few guys, I think they're down to like 3 or 4 people now. They take the. Oh my god!
No.
Okay, you know what? Let's end the podcast and I'll watch the movie real quick. We'll go back
okay,
to
no. You gotta address this. No, they don't lose a few guys. They would charge up there. And
I know at least 2 people die.
No, not in this scene. Just one, which we're getting to.
Okay.
So they charge the position. We actually see the whole thing from the perspective of, gosh, who was it again? It was just one guy, and we kind of hear the battle and see it from the distance, which is really cool. Nice directorial choice. We get to see it from afar, so we don't know what's happening, right? We don't have a direct experience. We're just watching it. And then you just hear some screaming. The shooting stops, you hear some screaming. Uh-oh, someone's been hit. Mm-hmm. They run up, and they see that it's the medic. Of course. Of all people to get hit. The medic has to get hit. It's Wade. And this is a particular scene I really want to bring up and highlight, because this scene is... You know how movie deaths are? Where they have this like inspiring, rousing speech? Like, this is how a different screenwriter would have written it. You gotta go get Ryan for me. Don't make my death pointless. Don't let me die for nothing, please. Just do this for me. And, I love you guys. You guys are my best friends. I'm glad I could die at the arms of my brothers.
I'm so happy they don't do that.
No, this is probably one of the most realistic death scenes I've ever seen. He is, first of all, hyperventilating, freaking out. He's got bullet holes, 3 different spots in his chest, and he's being a medic. He's got a medic brain on. He's like, what's going on? How bad is it? You got to put pressure on it. And he's kind of trying to walk them through it. And he's like, okay, what's the hole with the biggest amount of blood coming out? And he's like, okay, I'm going to put pressure on that. And he's like, lift my legs up. So he's trying to give them instruction about how to treat himself. And eventually they quiet down. They're like, what do we do? Tell us what to do. And he's like, some morphine would be nice. And they look at each other like, okay, just give it to him. So they give him morphine. They give him a lot of morphine because they think they all know at this point it's pretty much a lost cause.
Yeah.
And this is where you're expecting, oh, here comes the Hollywood acting part. No. Because this guy starts screaming out for his mother. He's like, Mama, I want to go home. Please, I want to go home. And he can see the fear in his face. And they're all just looking down at him, just, they can't say a word. They're frozen. And then he slowly just passes away. And what an intense sequence. That kind of death scene. That's what I want to see in these death scenes.
That's a realistic scenario for a movie.
That's
for
how
a war
people
movie.
would die. Yes.
Not a, like you said, go on without me. I'll just slow you down.
I'm glad I was able to fight alongside my brothers and some rousing speech. No, but it's just as effective because he's dead now, and they're all just They're all just their morale is way down. Let's just say, and in fact, one of them, what's his? I'm so bad at the characters' names. Reiben, I think. Reiben, yes, Reiben. Reiben says, "You know what? I'm done with this. I'm out." He's like, this mission's stupid. I'm gonna go off on my own. And a very tense sequence happens when Tom Sizemore pulls out his gun, points it right at his face, and says, "You're gonna shut up and you're gonna go back, or I'm gonna shoot you in the mouth." Which is a pretty intense exchange between the two, and just the anger and vitriol between them. And you understand it, though, because, he's watching his friends die. He doesn't want to be a part of this. He doesn't believe in the mission. And You know what Tom Hanks says? You know what? I don't believe in the mission either. I don't give a crap about Private Ryan, okay? I don't care. But I know that for me to go home, I got to find this kid. So I'm going to do it. Because if it means seeing my wife again, I'll do what it takes. And I'll find him. And I'll bring him home. And that isn't quite enough. But then he's like, how big is the pool gotten? He's like, $300. He's like, so, yeah, I'm from Pennsylvania and I'm a teacher. And he kind of tells that story. And then they're all just kind of frozen. They're just kind of looking at him and slowly de-escalates. So I think Tom Hanks, his characters, like Miller, I think is his name, really interesting performance there, and really kind of cool sequence. You see how he diffuses this situation. Because remember, this whole time Upham's like shouting at him, like, "What are you gonna do? Aren't you gonna, stop these guys?" Which, unfortunately, I just spaced. We forgot Steamboat Willie. So they capture a German.
Yeah,
this happens.
That's what I was gonna bring up. They capture a German, and basically they're trying
Steamboat
to decide.
Willie.
They're trying to decide what to do with him. They're like, and they want to kill him.
No, they don't. They're not trying to decide what to do with him.
Yeah.
They want to kill him. They're going to kill him. In fact, except first, they're like, "You're going to dig a grave for Wade because, you're one of the people who are responsible for killing him." So Upham helps him because he was saying, killing him isn't right. So they're talking, they're having conversation, and Upham's like begging him, "Please don't shoot him. Please, this isn't right. He's a prisoner. He's surrendered." And then Tom Hanks is just, you can see that he's thinking about it. And eventually he ties a blindfold on him. He's like, "All right, walk 1,000 paces and surrender to the first Allied patrol you see." And the whole squad's mad at him, except Upham. He's like, "Oh, thank you. You did the right thing." And some of them are more than others. But that's kind of what triggers that whole anger thing. Which I'm sorry, I got that a little mixed up. But you're right.
Yeah. But I like that sequence because it's very real. There's kind of like should we just kill this guy? He's killed so many of us. Like, it's almost like
before.
This. You want to have revenge on this guy.
I love that scene on the D-Day sequence.
Yeah.
When they're like shouting in German, they have their arms raised. Like, "What are you saying? I can't understand what you're saying." Boom, boom.
It's like, oh gosh.
Yeah, it's intense, but yeah, just that scene is pretty effective, for just carrying across how war changes people,
Yeah.
That it's really an us versus them mentality. Absolutely. These aren't human beings anymore. They're Germans.
Monsters. They're not thinking humans.
Yeah. Back to you. Sorry.
Yeah. No, so you have that, and yeah, so crap. I'm not trusting my own memory at this point. I'm like, oh great, I'm gonna screw up this plot some more now. You know what? Wikipedia, you just help me, please.
Wait, no. I know the plot if you want me to just do it.
Okay, go ahead.
All right.
You just
so
do it.
Well, I think we can just get ahead, and so they find a larger group of people, and through the help of a almost deaf guy who had a grenade go off near his head, so they have to write down their responses to him on a notebook. They figure out where Ryan ended up.
Yeah.
So they find find Ryan. He is held up in this bridge area. There's an area by a bridge, and their orders are to defend this bridge.
That's right. And then they're about to be outnumbered, I believe. They know...
no help has arrived yet.
Yeah, no help has arrived, and they know there is at least 1 or 2 German tanks. There's a battalion of Germans heading their way. They need
a lot of Germans.
And they're like, we're more than outnumbered. We're screwed. And so they kind of have to decide, like, well, this wasn't our mission. But
no. They don't decide
basically
that.
what happens is Ryan's like, I'm not leaving these guys. And so Tom Hanks is like, okay, we'll stay too then.
No. Well, not quite. Because...
Eventually, yes.
Well, Ryan's like, we're staying. And then I'm staying. And he's like... And they're like, what are you talking about? Do you realize that people have died for us to just get here to bring you home? And now you're saying you're not going to come with us? Do you not understand how much angry that makes us feel? And he's like, well, you don't understand. Like, these people are my brothers now, and I can't abandon them now. Not when they need my help. They're going to die if I leave them. And he doesn't want to leave,
right.
So Tom Sizemore and Tom Hanks, they get together, and Tom Hanks is like, what do you think I should do? And he's like, you don't want to hear what I think you should do. And he's like, well, part of me says, screw this guy. He doesn't want it to come home, so what? He can die. Fine. We can at least say we tried. But he's like, another part of me is saying, well, like you said at the beginning, this is kind of the whole point. And if we somehow miraculously make it out alive from this, we can say, hey, at least we saved Private Ryan. At least we did that mission. And at least that mom got to, see her son come home.
Right. And
he's like, I understand. That's another part. So then they decide to stay because of that comment. And I think it is a nice little scene between the two of them. So basically, Tom Hanks has to now take over the command because he is the officer there. He is the highest rank, so he's in charge. He has to set up basically an ambush point because they need to hold this bridge. To use a bunch of explosives, and they use a sniper tower on top of a clock tower, and a lot of different other techniques. And they're like, we're going to hold this position, or we're going to die trying, essentially is what they're saying. You can take it back over. I was just setting the scene up.
No, yeah. So then they set that all up. They have a plan.
Yep.
They don't know if it'll work, but as you said, they're going to die trying. So the Germans come in with a tank.
Wait.
Oh my God.
Again. Because remember, Ryan, we don't have any knowledge of who this guy is.
No, okay. I remember this part. Let me do it. I remember it now. I remembered it. Okay, so we have a sit-down between Tom Hanks and Matt Damon. And basically, they start sharing stories, telling each other about themselves. And we get an idea of who Ryan was and what his brothers meant to him. And
he's like, I can't even remember my brothers' faces.
Yeah.
And Tom Hanks is like, well, you can't just think of their faces. You got to think of a specific memory. And the very interesting thing about this sequence is it is improvised by Matt Damon. This whole monologue was completely improved, which is pretty impressive, considering how long it is and how detailed it is, and it works so well.
And you can tell, like, it looks like Tom Hanks is literally just reacting like any person would react to hearing this story, like. So you can kind of tell, but in a good way. It makes it feel more real then because it's improvised.
Yeah, it works really well. And now we get an idea of at least a little bit of humanity from Ryan, right? We get a little bit to go off of because up until this point, he's just a guy. He's just a soldier. Now we get a little story, a little bit of information and humanity from him to value him a little bit more. Despite, what the film has done so far to try and use external factors to make us value him.
Right, exactly. And then we get a little bit about Tom Hanks, but we don't ever get a lot, which is kind of an interesting idea.
Well, he just wants to go home and see his wife chopping the rose bushes with his old
that's the little bit
gloves.
We get. And it's interesting we don't get more.
Well,
but I like that we don't get more.
Because Matt Damon's like, hey, now tell me your story. And he's like, no, I'm just going to save that for me. And I like that,
Yeah.
That's his personal story. And we don't need it, we get enough.
No.
So, yeah, I like it. So now the battle starts. You
Yes.
can get into that now.
Yes, now the battle starts. They're in position. And of course, because I haven't watched this movie recently, I'm going to screw this up too. But a tank comes, and basically they're, outnumbered
they set up a
little
trap,
bit.
and they're trying to lure the tank in.
Yes.
Yeah. And one of the tanks doesn't go for it, but then the Tiger pulls up. Now, the Tiger is the coolest tank ever. It's huge, and it's awesome. So I just want to point that out. I love the Tiger. Yeah, it's intimidating for sure. But the Tiger takes the bait, and it goes in, and then the bullets start flying, and it's crazy, and it's intense. And this sequence is unrelenting. This is a very, very, harrowing 25, 30 minutes of cinema right here, where it's just all this battle. But it works. It's a great climax. Any specific thoughts from you on it?
I love it because it's so intense, and again, much like the D-Day sequence and all the other sequences prior to this, it feels very real. It is harrowing, and is very scary watching this, and each character gets their moment. All the characters that we've seen and we've gotten to know now in this battalion, they get their moment to basically do something to help fight back and to help defend this bridge. And we're spoiling the movie anyways. They each get their death sequences, but much like the death sequences prior, like Vin Diesel and Wade, who cares about Vin Diesel's character name, I guess, but they feel very real. They never focus on anyone, have a Hollywood death scene. And I like that a lot. And I appreciate that decision.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean...
So basically, by the end, it gets down to the only people that are left are Tom Hanks and Ryan.
And then I didn't want to skip that far ahead. I have a few comments.
Okay.
Particularly interesting stuff. I particularly love Upham's whole storyline. I really do enjoy him because he's the youngest and the least experienced. And now he's getting real battle, right?
Yeah.
This is intense. This is real. And he freaks out. He stops. And then he does some brave things like running, dodging bullets. But eventually he just shuts down out of fear. There's a particular sequence I like where he's hiding behind a pillar. And behind him you hear the German soldiers. And there's a tank there. And he's just looking around. He's stuck. He's trapped behind this. And you have these two guys up on top who are defending the position, one of the flanks. And he Upham hears some of them are walking up the stairs, and they hear it too. And they engage these guys. One gets shot in the neck and bleeds out horribly slowly. The other manages to take out all of them except one. And they have a very intense melee fight on the floor. And then we figure out, who is it? Oh, it's Steamboat Willie. He is back. And he rejoined the Germans exactly as they feared. And what happens is he pulls out a knife, and eventually Steamboat Willie slowly stabs it into the soldier's chest. And Upham, who is there on the staircase, is slowly going up, but not fast enough. He's not trying to save this guy. He's freaked out. He is scared to death. And Steamboat Willie appears at the top of the steps, sees that it's Upham, and walks right by him.
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah, because, he saved his life. So I guess he gets that pass. But yeah, like you said, then the battle winds down. Upham's actually pinned down. He's hiding behind a sort of a dirt barrier, and behind him are rows and rows of German soldiers shooting at Tom Hanks and Tom Sizemore and Ryan. And boy, is that intense. Tom Sizemore dies, and I love Tom Sizemore in this sequence because he gets shot in the legs, damn it, and he's running along limping. God damn it! He's getting shot over and over, and he's and he grabs Upham, and he's we're going across the bridge, but then he loses Upham and eventually gets shot pretty badly in the chest and passes away. And Tom Hanks sees that death, and that's pretty powerful for him.
Yeah, that's the other moment when he kind of gets shell shock and just
because a bomb goes off right by his head too.
Exactly. There's that,
Yeah, so
usually that'll happen.
But yeah, he just is taking all this in, and then eventually Tom Hanks does get shot through the chest.
Yeah.
Leaning against this motorcycle, and this tank is coming right at him. This massive tank. So he pulls out a pistol. And he's just shooting off round after round at the tank. And eventually, the tank explodes. What? Did Tom Hanks kill the tank with a pistol? No. The lightning planes come in and blew up the tank. They're anti-tank planes. And just in the nick of time, reinforcements arrive and save the day. They drive back the Germans. And then another great scene in the movie. The Germans, a group of about 6 Germans, surrendered to Upham, who's pointing a gun at them because they see all the explosions going off around them. Like, okay, we're freaked out. We're surrendering. And then Steamboat Willie is like, Upham. He points at him. He's like, it's me. And Upham raises his gun, shoots Steamboat Willie in the chest, and tells the rest of them to go. So his arc has completed. He did not feel mercy for Steamboat Willie after knowing what he did to his friends. So I think it's a very powerful scene.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you can probably take it from here.
Yeah, Tom Hanks is dying from bullet wounds. And
the only one to survive is Reidman. He lives.
Yeah.
So good for him.
But there's
So he's getting a medic, and then there's this quiet moment where it's just him and Ryan sitting next to the motorcycle.
And I believe Tom Hanks says something like, just make sure it's worth it.
No, he pulls him in, and he's like, earn it.
Yeah.
You need to earn it.
That's right. Earn it.
And then he dies. That was his last words.
And then we cut back to the beginning of the movie, to the cemetery.
Well, yeah.
Am I skipping something else?
No, yeah. We cut to
we
the
cut
old
back,
man again.
Now let me do this one, because I do remember this. We cut back, and we have this guy. We realize it's Ryan now.
Now we know it's Ryan.
We know it's Ryan.
Tom Hanks is dead.
And he is visiting the grave of Tom Hanks' character. And with his family, I believe it's his wife and his kids are there.
And grandkids.
And he starts to cry, and his wife goes to comfort him, and he's just like, just tell me something. Did I earn it? Did I
live a good life?
Did I live a good life, basically? And I love that scene. It's so powerful. Because...
Well, because he breaks down in tears, and he's just talking to him, and he's like, I just lived the best life I could, and, I hope if you're,
did I do right by you?
Did I live up to your expectations? Was I worth it?
And it's, that's so powerful, because I can't even imagine, you just got saved, and so many men died because of it. You got to go home. You would feel like this urge, you need to live a good life and do something with your life that you got, and so many lost their lives because of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really powerful, and that's actually the moment of the movie I teared up a little bit, because it finally got me.
That ending all the time.
It finally got me of the movie, because that was intense. That was because the actor does a great job, and just portraying the emotion and the weight, the physical weight of all of that guilt on him. You just can see it, It's a really good sequence. Really great ending to the film.
Absolutely. A couple of things I want to mention. I love John Williams' score in this movie, as a lot of his scores are great. This is one of the ones I think kind of doesn't get mentioned when you talk about Williams' scores quite as much, but especially his what's called Hymn of the Fallen.
Yeah, Hymn of the Fallen's good.
I guess that's the main part I'm talking about. But Hymn of the Fallen is incredible, and it just feels like such an ode to the real veterans and the real men that died at war.
I agree. I think Williams' score it's fine. It's good.
Yeah, okay.
It's not amazing.
I'll give you that. I guess the part I wanted to talk about was that.
And that's why I like it, because I think Williams' score would have been, if it was over the top, it would have been really distracting.
Yeah.
The movie needs to be silent for a lot of the time.
In fact, during the D-Day sequence, there is no music. Which is really great.
Yes.
I love that.
Because the Williams style of music, I don't want to feel like I'm ragging on the guy. But I think that...
It's not right for war movies.
It's not right for this type of movie. It's really dark movie. And the stuff he does provide, I like. But I never would say, I love this soundtrack. Or this is a great war movie soundtrack. It's sort of, if it was any more, it would have been distracting.
Yeah. absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could argue, well, he made a great score for Schindler's List, but
Schindler's List is a different type of
that's
movie.
a different movie completely.
Yeah.
But
I love the Schindler's List score.
yes.
That's why the funny thing is we're bringing up the movies of the John Williams soundtracks I have criticisms for. There are a lot of movies I love Williams scores.
Yeah, I mean, the ones you think about when you think of Williams are the Adventurous, the Indiana Jones, the Star Wars, the
That's where the
Park.
great, big, bombastic Williams
absolutely.
themes can
so
really be
it's just
used.
not quite right.
Yeah.
That being said, I think Hymn of the Fallen is incredible, and it's a very moving score.
Oh, yeah.
And also the sound effects, which sound editing and sound mixing both got awards. War films usually that does happen, but I feel like this is an example of absolutely earning it because it feels real and it's. I've never been to war again, obviously, but it's like how I would imagine it, and it's quite an interesting movie to watch and a harrowing movie because of it.
Yeah.
And it really brings you there, and I don't know. Whenever I watch this movie, I just have so much respect for the people that actually did fight in this war, and that actually did lose their lives, and even the ones that did survive, and had to live with everything they saw there.
Yeah.
It's so sad, and this movie really brings it home, and I love it for that reason. That's why it's one of my favorite war movies.
Yeah, I love Saving Private Ryan. I agree with you almost all the way. It's a fantastic movie. It's incredibly made. Spielberg shows a lot of talent here. He's really honed his craft.
Yeah.
And the movie's intense, it's gritty, it's dark, and it's realistic. And it's like almost the closest movie I could picture to a war simulator that you could ever go into. But it's a really nice story, It's just about these guys that just want to bring this guy home so his mom, their mom doesn't have to have all of her sons die. What a nice little story that is, And it's something heroic in a sense. You can get behind that. And I think that particular scene I brought up, which is my favorite scene in the movie, really sells it. So, yeah, this movie does a great job. I really don't have a lot of complaints here at all. Nitpicks here and there, but every film has that. Overall, yeah, one of the best war movies ever made.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, just side note, I was just thinking about it, there's not a lot of the Spielberg whimsicalness in it,
No, basically
Which
none.
is
Yeah.
good. I think he restrained himself very much. He knew the kind of movie this needed to be, and he did it well. So, yeah. Just wanted to bring that up. Okay. We've talked long enough about this. Let's get on to the movie that recently came out.
Yeah, Dunkirk. So, we've both only seen this movie once. So maybe we could cover it at greater length if we did a Nolan special. But we're just going to give our basic thoughts, what we thought of the movie. We won't be able to give like a detailed plot description like we did with the other two.
Sure.
But general thoughts,
Absolutely.
Sean. What did you think of Dunkirk?
I really liked Dunkirk. One of the things that stood out to me in this movie is that, unlike Saving Private Ryan, for example, there is no main character. This is not a character-driven movie. There are characters in it, obviously.
Yeah.
But
it's a lot like Bridge Too Far in a way.
Yes,
It's a lot of different characters.
It's an ensemble cast in that sense. And it jumps around between the characters. But that never feels like one character is over to another character. Or never feels jumpy, I guess is the best way to describe it. Do you want to really quickly tell us a bit about Dunkirk and the plot real quick?
Yeah, sure. So the plot follows 3 different elements of the Dunkirk evacuation. Now, if people don't know, we should probably say what the Dunkirk evacuation was. So in the very early stages of World War II, Germany was well into invading France. Basically, it was crushing the French army. The British army was there to help. They were running out of supplies, and they were running out of time. Britain was about to lose a lot of men. Too many they could afford if they wanted to do a home defense strategy. They didn't want to lose this many people to being captive. So they needed to evacuate them and get them across the English Channel. The English Channel is not a huge body of water, but it's big enough, right? It presents a challenge, especially when you have hazards like bombers and U-boats to worry about. So essentially, all of these men were stuck on a beach, and slowly and meticulously and with a lot of difficulty, they were transported off the beach by a mix of civilian and military boats, a lot of which sank, and eventually a lot of them did make it home, some did not. A lot of people died. and it was a pretty big disaster. But it did end up, they did end up getting a decent amount home, so that's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then that's kind of what this movie is based on. It's a pretty straight on account. You know, they're just talking about what happened. There's no fictional story like Ryan. You know, this is just what happened, right?
Yeah.
There are fictional characters.
Sure.
And there are fictional, maybe I wouldn't say storylines, but like, you know, tales that happen. I would call them like tales, little tales in the movie. But these are all based on real people, real events. You know, this is much to the very same thing that happened back then.
Yeah.
So yeah, the mole, they call it, the land stuff, that takes place over 1 week. And then you have the sea stuff, which takes place over 1 day, and there are nice title cards that tell you all this. Mm-hmm. And then the air stuff takes place over 1 hour. So, starting with the land, you have a few soldiers. Do you know these guys? I only know Harry Styles, which sounds kind of dumb, but
I didn't think about it until you said that sound kind of.
These guys seem like new people to
right.
me. Which I think is they are mostly new.
Look it up real quick. Sorry,
I just did. Yeah,
up.
They're new people. But yeah, we have Harry Styles, who I just want to mention because he was in One Direction, and now he's a solo music artist. And for the 5 or so minutes he's in this movie, I thought he did a good job. And the funny thing is, one little fun detail is that Nolan didn't know the extent of fame that Harry Styles had when he cast him. He just said, "Hey, he was a talented young guy who auditioned like everyone else, and he got the part," which is kind of nice when you think about it. You know, it's like Nolan was not influenced at all. He was just casting him by the way he performed, and I was not disappointed in any way.
No, he didn't stand out at all as a sore thumb or anything, so that's good.
Yeah, it was not a Sofia Coppola situation, for sure.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so then a major character you have in the land is Kenneth Branagh, who plays a commander who is trying to orchestrate the evacuation and get people onto these boats. And essentially, the beach sequences are really cool. You have like thousands of extras just on this beach, lined up, trying to wait for these boats, and then you have dive bombers coming where you can just hear the...
Yeah, oh my gosh, I love those moments because you just hear those and you're just like so scared that, you know, you're waiting
Feel
in
the tension.
anticipation
Yeah.
with those soldiers, like when are they going to start shooting?
And then they scatter and drop to the ground, and then the bombs are going off. And then one time they're going off in like a line, boom, boom, and they're approaching the soldier that we're following. And eventually they do kill the guy right behind him, but he does make it out. Yeah, really intense stuff. I agree.
Yeah, that's a lot of attention because they're just lined up almost like a slaughterhouse, just trying to get to these boats and just waiting for the next boat to come.
Yeah, it's scary stuff. But that's what actually happens, so it's very realistic.
Exactly.
And then you have the sea storyline, which mostly follows Mark Rylance, his son, and one of his compatriots. I don't really know their relations. I think he's just a local boy.
Yeah.
And they all get on this boat because they've been ordered by the Navy to go and rescue some soldiers who are across the English Channel. So Mark Rylance, being the heroic and nice guy that he is, decides to do it himself and not let anyone take his boat, and drives off into the sunset to try and rescue the men he finds. But then he stumbles upon a almost sunken ship, and atop it, a single survivor played by Cillian Murphy in a great role by him.
Most of Nolan's films.
Yeah, one of Nolan's very much recurring actors.
Yep.
I think he's a pretty talented guy, too. He was probably best known, aside from Nolan, for playing the main character in 28 Days Later. So he's had a pretty good career. Yeah, he's great here. And he has an interesting role. He has to play kind of a coward, but a coward that you understand why he's a coward, right?
Yeah.
So it's a tough sort of role to play to make you not hate him, which you have reason to hate him, I guess, in this movie, but you also have reason for sympathizing.
Yeah, you get a reason for both, and even the characters...
Yeah, we're going to try and stay away from spoilers,
too. Without spoiling anything, the characters in the movie...
All I'm doing is going to reveal trailer elements.
Both. Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
That's what I'm saying.
Trailer stuff only for these modern movies. We're going to try and stick to that.
Right. I agree with that. Unless the trailer decided to spoil something, then we'll try not to be a total a-hole like whoever edited the trailer.
Exactly. And to edit this. Oh, there it goes. Did it just stop and start though?
Oh, fuck.
Could you check? Pause it.
All right, there we go.
Okay. No spoilers is what we're talking about. So yeah, we're not going to spoil anything. That wasn't spoiled in the trailers. And then we have the air sequence, which is focusing on Tom Hardy and company, who are flying in some Spitfires and attempting to provide some aerial cover towards our poor soldiers.
And don't worry, guys. Nolan still figured out a way to make sure Tom Hardy wears a mask. I did kind of... I thought of that while watching the movie. I was like, wow, he only wears masks in most of his movies. But jokes aside, Tom Hardy's very good in this movie with the very little he has. But
he has a decent amount, actually. He's one of the bigger parts of the movie. Sure. And he does a good job. I do want to talk about a few things. Starting off with Nolan's direction. I really think Nolan did a fantastic job directing this film. You know, it's a tough thing to do with a war movie that's this short. This movie clocks in 1 hour and 47 minutes, which is a full hour shorter than our other two movies. It has a lot less screen time, but it manages to tell its story, at the same time. And it doesn't feel too short. It feels actually pretty perfect. So I congratulate Nolan for that. Fantastic directed sequences. The IMAX, by the way, we both saw it in IMAX. Looks absolutely fantastic. If you're going to see this movie, see it in IMAX.
Oh, yeah. It's worth the ticket price for sure.
Yeah, because the screen is huge. A good amount of the movie is shot in IMAX footage. So it takes up the whole screen. It's huge. And immersion is just at its all top. At its complete top. You have the immersion scale. It was a fantastic viewing experience. Hoyt van Hoytema, I think is how you say his name. I might be wrong on that, but his new cinematographer, who replaced Wally Pfister. I really liked Wally Pfister, so I'm like, I don't know if someone can replace him. But after Interstellar and now Dunkirk, I think he does just as good a job as Wally did. I really like his work. I think it is, very similar in tone, but, I see that he's also doing things that Wally never did, and actually, I really like the cinematography in this movie. It's really fantastic. Now let's talk about the sound, because a war movie needs good sound. Oh boy, I loved the sound in this movie, especially during the plane sequences. It was loud, it was roaring, it filled your eardrums, and I'm like, that's what it should do. This movie needs to be loud, and Hans Zimmer really helps. His booming score, with just that constant ticking of that stopwatch, the whole movie, just tick, 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 tick. It's like the movie has a rhythm to it. I loved that. It was so great. And then, the way he uses his really low notes to try to fill your whole space with stimulus, because that's what it should be. You're in the middle of a war. It should feel that way, right? Intense.
Yeah, exactly. I think the ticking sound, it kind of gives it almost like a timer, Like
I said, yeah.
Yeah, like it's just, these people need to get across quickly, and stuff, and it adds to that tension that is felt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I just basically repeat everything you said. But I'm like, dang it, you stole everything I was going to say. But, no, I agree. This movie is a very well filmed. It is really late. That is why my sentences aren't making sense right now. But, I definitely got into the thrilling aspects of this movie, like I said, with the beach scenes and the... there's a scene where a boat is going underwater and stuff, and they need to escape, and that's a very thrilling scene as well. It's being shot at by Germans.
The boat's sinking, and there's a torpedo that blows it up, and then these people are starting to drown. Yeah, it's pretty intense. There's some good scenes here. Yep.
There are other tense sequences that aren't in the trailer, so we won't talk about them. But there's some great tense moments that really put you in the sequence. It really puts you in the mood of the war that they were fighting and just what they were trying to escape from. And I guess the one thing, it's like, it's not even a nitpick, it's just kind of like, this is why I prefer Saving Private Ryan, because I can gauge the characters. That being said, for this kind of movie, we don't need characters, and I think this is definitely a different kind of movie, and some audience members may not care for that, but I'm kind of like, I don't care, suck it up.
Yeah, the weekend of this movie for me is the storytelling, because there isn't really a story to it. It's just it's kind of recounting the events from different perspectives, kind of like how Bridge Too Far did it, but it's a lot shorter, so we don't get the whole planning. We're thrown right into the action, right? Sure. We just get this action-packed movie, which is fine, and it's really well made. I think just what holds it back for me is because I'm a story guy. I do like get invested in a story, and I just wish there was a little bit more of that here. It's more like it's not my thing more than I have a problem with it. I understand people who love Dunkirk. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I really do like the movie. It's just not quite there for me because of that. It's just held back. But that's just personal preference. This movie is really well made. It's.
I feel like it's more of a kind of movie that's put you in a certain mood. It's just experience what it was like to be there kind of movie, as opposed to a movie where there's a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
Which. Those are great. I love movies like that.
Yeah, and I think that as a non-traditional...
Put you in a place.
As a non-traditional movie, it does work pretty well because it kind of has a beginning, middle, and end. Because we get an idea of, what the story is and where these people are at the beginning and where they are at the end and, their mental states. And I think it is told enough, and that's why I give it as much credit as I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just missing a little bit of extra punch. If you're looking for a lot of closure... Don't watch this movie, thinking you're going to get it, because there isn't a lot of closure.
No, there's not.
Because this is obviously a small story in a much bigger narrative that is World War II. But if you're just looking to experience an event of World War II in a film form that is very well made, extremely thrilling, has great moments. By the way, it's not nearly as bloody as Saving Private Ryan, and is probably even less violent than A Bridge Too Far. This movie, it's pretty PG-13 down the line. But it works for the movie. It's not like I miss the violence. It's just it does have a little bit less intensity at times because because they have like the dogfight sequences, which don't need that to be tense. It still works.
Yeah, I think it's more the tensity comes from the escape itself. But you're right. It doesn't quite have that same level as other war films do. That is unfortunate. That being said, I still really like this movie. I still really got into it.
Oh yeah, I loved Dunkirk. It was an absolutely fun movie. Great to watch in IMAX. I think that just makes the movie all that much better. To see it in the IMAX theater, it was a lot of fun. So I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So both of us say go see Dunkirk.
Yes, solid recommend.
In fact, see all three of these movies.
Yeah, absolutely. See all of them. I think that war movies, sure, they have their niche crowd, but I think anyone can get stuff out of them, and some of them are violent, so I understand, but they are really good movies.
If you're squeamish, maybe don't see Hacksaw Ridge or Saving Private Ryan, for example,
there are some violent
or
ones.
Platoon. But I like this genre, honestly. I should go back to it more. I've seen a lot of Vietnam movies. I haven't seen a lot of World War II movies.
I've seen a lot of World War II movies.
Looking at a list.
In fact, I think we should just do another World War II special, just because there's so much out there.
Longest Day, Hacksaw Ridge, whatever,
Bridge on the River Kwai, I'd love to do that,
Pearl Harbor, I'm kidding.
There's a lot of classics here that are really worth talking about. I'm sure we'll get to them. But for now, we should call it. I think we actually talked pretty well in depth for these movies.
I think we did pretty good.
Yeah. So, thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. I know that we are a little uneven with our uploads right now. It's just we're juggling two very different schedules. We're still getting into the groove of all this stuff.
Yeah.
But expect a little bit more regularity as time goes on. But we enjoy recording it, and we hope you guys enjoy listening it. All right, thanks you guys, and we'll catch you next time.
All right, see you then.